All right. Hello, hello.
We're back in Hokum Lodge.
Here we are. It's autumn, and it's been a few weeks, so figured we'd start with a little reintroduction. I was just chatting with a colleague, and if you're new to this series, if you've been a part of every single one, I thought we'd just kind of circle back, kind of reframe. Colleague was saying, he's like, no, you should just give a little context for what this particular interview series is, who you guys are, what you're kind of bringing to the table, and what people can expect. Because, we're back into the flow, the routine. We've just come out of summer. We had a good couple of inner city plant walks, as it were. Blaine and I were hanging out in a downtown park, just exploring all the plant life. We barely got through a quarter of what was out there, but we did cover some great content, kind of walking you through. But, maybe just to kind of start off again, my name is Malcolm Saunders, owner and creative visionary of Cellar, and we have Blaine the Herbman, Blaine the Herman Andrusek. Been a herbalist for, I don't know how many decades?
Three,
3 decades.
I guess.
Yeah, and this series is all about the wild wisdom that he has gathered throughout his many years of being in this field, both as a student and as a teacher. And here we are. This is just very informal conversation that we've been having. Not every week, but we're going with the flow.
Mostly so.
Yeah, mostly so.
That's an expression that I bring up on opening night of a botany course, is to explain to the students that you're going to learn a whole bunch of new language because it's Latin.
Right.
And a whole bunch of new descriptive adjectives. And nature, well, somebody, probably a man, Linnaeus, had to categorize things and put everything in straight lines and boxes, and nature is far more random than that.
For sure.
So I always like to say that you're going to learn a whole bunch of rules, mostly so.
Yeah.
Because every single rule, as far as genuses and families and all of that go, there's always somebody that breaks the rules.
Yeah.
You know, like juniper, for example, being coniferous, he had to, in fact, he did it right there. He said the fruiting bodies are cones or berry-like cones.
Right.
Now, right there is a stretch, because there's nothing cone-like about a juniper berry. It's a freaking berry, all right?
Right.
And so we get into this mostly so thing. And there's an old expression like nobody bats 100. And everything that we learn in herbalism, there's always something that's a little offbeat in a plant family or within a genus, more so in families than genuses. Usually by the time we get to a genus, we're pretty close to the truth. Like, at least we know it's a Chevrolet, but did it come from General Motors or not? You know, that kind of thing.
Right.
So I think if we look back to when Terry Willard started Wild Rose College, I think he was on the right track when, to work with herbs, we have to know something about how the body works. Yeah. And the introductory course, which is called Herb 1, I like how it was set up, where half of each class is learning about, say, the vascular system. So you learn about the heart and the veins and the arteries and so forth, so that you have some idea how it is that the herbs work. Mm-hmm. And it amazed me that I remember one course where the woman sitting in front of me was a 8 years experienced ER nurse, and she actually tilted her head and said, "Oh, that's how blood pressure works." And I was just astonished that somebody in that position
Right.
could not even understand blood pressure.
Yeah.
You know, so anyway, so through a series of classes, we learn how the body works so that we understand why it responds to certain herbs a certain way. And then as you learn the herbs a bit, you learn more about the chemistry and then the biochemistry, so you understand exactly what you're doing to a body. Like, how could the same herb, like cayenne pepper, for example, raise blood pressure if it's too low, but lower it if it's too high?
Yeah.
That would make absolutely no sense to a Western trained cardiologist. It
Right.
just wouldn't make sense because they're used to one drug working one way or the other, right?
Yeah.
But when you realize that arteries are round pipes, a series of round muscles, and with every, when you think about it, if you feel a pulse, like the heart pumps, a big wave comes out through the aorta, and it goes through smaller and smaller pipes, so it finally gets down here to my wrist. And arteries are a series of round muscles that expand and contract. And so if I have back pain, for example, and I do crunches on a slant board, I'm getting my abdominal muscles stronger so that they support my back better, right? So whether your arteries are too lazy or too uptight due to stress or whatever, the more that we can exercise all of those arteries, all
Right.
those little round muscles, the more that we're going to tone. So the word tonic comes up. We're going to tone the pipes to keep the blood pressure the best it can be.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, that's how they work, basically.
Cool.
So the background stories exist for how we use the herbs. And most modern medicines were plant-based.
Yeah.
They just got cleaned up.
Or fungal based, if you want to be specific.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, correct. And we've always been, or the model, the Western model, is to look at the herb, take it apart, look at all the little points on a gas chromatogram, and kind of go, oh, that's the one we're after.
Right.
So can we sell that? Well, somebody's already selling the herbs. No, we're a pharmaceutical company, so we want to get something patented, so we have to have something exclusive here. So unfortunately, God owns the patent to that herb, right? But if we can isolate
Right.
that one chemical, or even isolate it in a way that nobody's ever done before, then we have a drug, and we can patent it, right? But the problem is that in a herb, there's all of these other little chemicals that come along with the big one.
Right.
And when you take those away, you get, and it's helpful for diagnosis and prescription purposes to have one chemical work one way on something, but what you lose is all of those little buffers.
Yeah.
And that's why we have so many side effects to drugs and less side effects with herbs.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, the whole thing attracted me. All I wanted to know when I started studying, I never wanted to be a herbalist. That was never a goal of mine. I had come back from living 4.5 months in the woods alone and had a few, injuries along the way and that sort of thing. I'm lucky to be alive, frankly. I've almost drowned a couple of times. I've almost severe frostbite. I've almost starved. And I just wanted to learn more about the body and how it works. I wanted to learn more about first aid. And first aid, by definition, is what to do till the doctor comes. Well, what about when you're in the bush alone and there's nobody coming?
Right.
So then you have to, so I wanted to know more about the body, how it works, and then learn more. I'd already been working with plants a little bit. Books that back then were pretty sketchy on bad photography, bad line drawings. You'd get a book on so-called wild edible plants, and
Yeah.
I'd look at it later and go, well, that could be one of 5 things. You could actually poison yourself with this drawing. So the books out there are much better now. But step by step, I just wanted to know more about myself and how to save my own butt. But the more that I studied, and obviously I like talking, I'm verbose and get lost on tangents. This happens all the time. But people were pushing me to do talks and public speaking, and would you talk at our club or something like that? And one by one, a career of public speaking grew. And eventually, I certainly didn't want to be a practitioner, but every time I did a talk and it sounded like I knew what I was talking about, there was women almost grabbing my leg to not let me out the door because they wanted their husband, daughter, their pet turtle, whatever, to come and see me for a consult.
Right.
And I finally gave in
Yeah.
and started a practice, right? And then once I was practicing, there were things that I knew I wanted to accomplish with herbs, or eventually essential oils got involved. And I couldn't find the product on the shelf
Right.
in the health food stores. So that's what prompted me to start making things myself for my clients.
Yeah.
And see, I almost said patients there, but we're not supposed to say patients. We're not supposed to say diagnose. We don't diagnose. So we don't prescribe things.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a doctor does. But we can recommend things, and that's okay. So we can recommend things to a client. We can't prescribe things to a patient.
Right.
Those walls have softened a lot
Yeah.
in the years since I started being a herbalist, but they're still there, and I don't mind that. I think those people deserve some respect, and I think we deserve some respect too. So anyway, there's room for us both to work,
Yeah.
and some of the chemotherapy drugs are directly plant-based.
Mm-hmm.
One of them comes from it's a type of cedar, doesn't grow around here, just grows low on the ground, but it's at both ends of our country, and it grew a lot in China, which is where they were picking it originally. It's a ground cedar, and that's where one of the chemotherapy drugs comes from. Like they haven't taken it apart. They're still using the plant.
Right. Amazing.
So
Yeah.
anyway, the more we get together.
It's a familiar story. I've heard from many others, the kind of the reluctant herbalist or the business owner that's like, this doesn't exist, right? I need this for my own practice. I want this for myself, my friends, my community, creating it, and voila. And we were just chatting on the drive over this idea of word of mouth too. It's how you grew your business. People would see you speak, they would refer you, recommend you, your products, that kind of thing. And when you're onto something, when you're doing something right, when you're doing it well, that's kind of how it goes and flows.
And it outgrew me.
Yeah.
And that's why I finally crashed. I had what in the old days they'd call a nervous breakdown. I was working too hard, trying to help everybody else and not taking care of myself.
Yeah.
And that's why a few times I've had a student come up to me, how do I get to become a you?
Right.
And I said, you don't want to. All right. So maybe give them a few tips on how to structure things differently.
Right.
Because a lot of my students over the years have become very successful.
Yeah.
Well, here you are. I met you at a herb walk.
Right. There we
Right?
are. Yeah,
And
that's true.
Now you've got this massive business going on, and
Yeah, we could go through quite a long list of all the folks that you really influenced and helped along the way. So
it makes me very proud that I can spark somebody's interest enough that they decide to become a naturopath, for example.
right.
Or become a Chinese doctor or whatever. Those are both, grueling courses to go through.
Yeah.
And if they say they started because of something I said or something about my attitude, how could I not be proud?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, for sure. And it kind of relates back to what you're saying. And I was going to ask you this question, this mirror of, herbalism and life. How in a herb, it's not one chemical constituent, like it takes a community, it takes all these supportive actors, shall we say, just like you receive so much, buffers, you receive so much help and guidance and, circumstance, and you've been, a seed for others among all their other influences as well. Like we're really working as a whole.
Well, anywhere that I've been, for example, teaching at a few massage therapy schools, it wasn't that I wanted to become a masseuse, but I just learned a few tricks along the way.
Yeah.
And having somebody show me how when somebody's got a sore shoulder, you can rub your thumb along the scapula. The body's almost like building a house or whatever. We have a frame, then we have to have plumbing, we have to have wiring. So there's the nervous system and the plumbing. So when you build a house, you have all these different specialists that come in, right? So treating bodies is very similar. So I got to realize very quickly that somebody's got a sore shoulder and you run your thumb along the scapula and say, oh my gosh, it's like a golf ball in there. Yeah, well, that's where their problem is, right? They've got some nerves bound up.
Yeah.
And if you just kind of get your thumb on that and just start to push really hard, oh my gosh, it's almost like an egg popping.
Yeah.
And so I've learned a few little things like that over the years, just to help friends with. Wasn't like I wanted to be a massage therapist, but
Yeah.
little things. And again, a few things from Ayurvedic medicine and a few things from Chinese medicine. Didn't want to be any of those, but I'll make referrals, to people, as I've had, my whole business has built on referral basis. Somebody's already made 5 phone calls trying to find an essential oil and nobody's got it. And everybody so far has said, if you can't find any, call Blaine.
Right.
So I finally get a call. Is this Blaine? Are you the Blaine? Because can you help me with this oil that I can't find?
Yeah.
And actually it comes in 4 species. Well, what do you need exactly? There's 4 kinds? There's 4 kinds of jasmine? Well, no, there's 18, that sort of thing.
Right.
So just one step at a time. But I feel that because of me teaching, and this is why I'm still for, in today's world, everybody's doing things online. But when you do things online, for a reason, like during the plague, etc., you might have a question and you don't get to have an immediate response.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a live class, you might have your answer in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
By waving your hand or whatever. You say, well, what did you just say there? Is it, And also, you're in a room with a bunch of other human beings, some of which may be other practitioners.
Yeah.
And there may be a question that I can't answer because I don't know everything. And somebody else in the room might pipe up and provide an answer, and we all grow from that experience. So I'm still really big on live classes. I think you learn more, you learn better, you get a broader perspective of things,
Yeah.
and you might just make some new friends.
Yeah, no, totally. I agree. So when are we going to have you for a class at Light Cellar in person?
Well, that's up to you.
Yeah, we had a good one in June, so we'll have to do it again.
Well, that was only 45 minutes that turned into 2 hours, but
For sure.
Pick a title.
Yeah, and we'll go.
I had your friend Sasha had just emailed me back, and I have no idea what she has in mind for me. We haven't talked yet.
Right.
But she was wondering about a herb called comfrey.
Yeah.
And she's heard a lot of bad stories about it. And so in my email back to her, I said, comfrey, for example, we could spend at least a whole day talking about comfrey.
Yeah.
Maybe even a whole weekend. Just about that one herb. So what else have you got?
Right.
That's what I sent back to her.
Yeah.
But we'll see what her response is.
Yeah.
Because it's a darn good herb, but it does have some issues, and we have to respect them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. So on that note, if you're watching, and if you, again, whether you've been part of the past 10 episodes, or you're just tuning in for the first time, this is your opportunity. Post some comments, post some questions down below. Anything that you want to hear us kind of go further into depth on. It might be a particular herb, like comfrey. It might be maybe something a diagnosis, that you or someone you know and love have been given. And Blaine just might have some insights. So we've had that come through in previous episodes, and can help steer our conversation. We got lots of things to say, lots of things to talk about, and we never know which way it's going to go. We're just here having fun each week.
Down, sideways.
Yeah. And you are welcome to be part of this experience.
Yeah, send us in. What do you want to know about?
Yeah.
There's been times when I've done, say, a lunch hour series for City of Calgary workers, and that's the first thing we do is put a memo out saying, what do you want from Blaine?
Right.
So then I know that, next week I'm going to talk about herbs that work on the female reproductive system, for example, and questions like that.
Yeah.
And then we don't waste time.
Yeah. And then in the summary of these videos, I try and, highlight 2 or 3 things in the title, that really kind of help shape our conversation. So again, if you're looking through past episodes, that might help dial you in. But there's so many little gems, so many little bits of wisdom that come through, plus the fun, the entertaining stories that Blaine has got plenty of. So maybe let's start off with this. This idea, we've kind of been dancing around this idea, this concept, this mirror, this reflection of, studying herbs and the reflection of life in general that it has. Like, what truths did you come to as a herbalist, studying plants, working with people, that have helped you in life?
Structurally, humans are really, really simple creatures. 96% of your body is only 4 atoms. Isn't that amazing? Wow. 4 atoms. We're that simple. But when you put it all together, are we ever complicated?
Yeah.
And are we ever different?
Right.
And that's why if somebody stands up in front of a microphone, I don't care where they are, and says, I have the answer to everything,
right,
I usually leave the room or run screaming.
Yeah.
Because it's just not that simple. And that's why I'm sympathetic to doctors. When I hear somebody say, well, I asked my doctor and she should know, I said, well, or I'll say, I agree, she should know. But she only went to school for 8 or 10 years, and that was a long time ago. Mm-hmm. And science has changed a lot since then. And everybody has a life. I don't care whether you're a medical doctor or a carpenter. At the end of the day, you deserve to go home and relax with your family. And if all you do is study, you're going to end up with your own problems. And so humans are so complicated, and one of the biggest mistakes that happens with Western medicine, but also with herbal medicine, is we see somebody's got an issue and they're presenting with certain symptoms. Or is that the condition, or is that condition the symptom, or is the symptom the condition? And that's what we have to work out. So, for example, a lot of children end up on puffers, on inhalers, because they have asthma, and their real problem is too much pasteurized dairy product. It's a dietary problem, not a lung problem. And if the puffers seem to work, mostly so, there we're back to mostly so, then skin problems start to show up. And we end up on cortisone creams to correct it. It can go one way or the other. Mm-hmm. I've seen really bad legs that we use cortisone creams on, and they sort of work, but then we have a lung problem all of a sudden,
right,
where the real problem is diet. So it takes a long time, and that's why I like working together as a team with other people. Like if somebody's been referred to me and we talk on the phone and I ask them why they're calling, what their issue is, if I think somebody else, I'm a meat and potatoes guy, give me a severed limb, I can work with all sorts of things really well. But if I hear the person talking about a condition that I don't think I can help, why would I waste their time and money coming to see me, wasting my time, with something that I don't think I can help? So I always kind of interview people for quite a while on the phone. Well, now I'm retired, supposedly, but I would also always spend a lot of time on the phone and say, well, thank you for calling. Thank you, your friend, for having you call me, but I don't think this is something I can help you with. I think you should call a former student of mine named Sharon. Here's her number, because I think you're in better hands there. It's a referral system.
Yeah.
My whole career has been a referral system, and that's why I work that way. Nobody has all the answers. Mm-hmm. And maybe you need a skin specialist. One of my fellow residents at the care home had this thing start growing on his face. It wasn't a boil, it was something bigger. He had this big thing on his cheek, and it was really messy. And his doctor wasn't sure what to do with it, so he recommended him to a skin specialist who didn't want to touch it, who sent him to a surgeon who didn't want to touch it because it was involving the whole inside of the mouth, and it's too much of a chance of infection there. I don't know how they finally dealt with him, but he saw at least 5 professionals, and I have no doubt whatsoever in my mind that I would have dealt with that for about $20 worth of myrrh.
Right.
You know, like myrrh happens to increase white blood cell activity by about 400%, so we wouldn't have had a problem with infection, and it's very, very astringent. It dries things up. So whatever that was and wherever it came from, it didn't come from, well, maybe it did come from space, but we had to dry it up and kill any infection that was there.
Right.
And I know that myrrh would have done that. You know, so sometimes things are simple, sometimes things are really, really complicated.
Yeah.
You're not allergic to peppers unless you eat them with tomatoes. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to find allergies.
Yeah. Now, in the case of that myrrh, would you use essential oil or hydrosol, or just theoretically kind of playing that out? What would be a good
I'd work
form?
with the oil because that's what I work with.
Yeah, more concentrated.
And then we can use it on both sides.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing wrong with taking it inside the mouth. Depending on where we were at, I'd probably just be using it topically. The inside of the mouth irrigates itself so frequently that it's hard to work with.
Yeah.
I was just, for one of my clients, I was writing up a description of the dental pain that I make.
Yeah.
And I admitted quite freely, this is as far as I can go without benzocaine. So I just call it dental pain.
Yeah.
And there's another product called Ambisol, okay, that's on the market, over the counter, I think, and one called Oragel. And they use a lot of plant-based. They use essential oils, but they've got the benzocaine in there. But when you take one benzocaine, then you can't talk for the rest of the day, and they might bite your tongue, have lunch, where the oils taste better,
Yeah.
and you don't get that whole numb tongue thing.
Yeah.
And some people have told me that they worked as well without those side effects. But I have Ambisol in my first aid kit, in my tackle box, because if I ever, well, I've been barbless fishing for probably 40 years, but if I ever get a fish hook or something in my finger, or maybe we're fishing together and you're not barbless yet, so I get one of your hooks in my finger, my face, and we have to cut it out virtually, I want the Ambisol there because I want the benzocaine today.
Right.
I'm not anti-drug.
Yeah.
You know, we use drugs. I don't want to go through a dental appointment without an anesthetic.
Yeah.
I'm not a pain freak, you know. So, but I can help something like that, a procedure like that, whether it's a broken arm, for example, is going to heal a lot faster if you're supplementing calcium partially. But our body makes its own calcium from silica.
Yeah.
So I would have you on herbs really high in silica, so that your bones can heal faster. You know, we needed the cast and we needed all of that done, but the herbs can just improve the process.
Yeah.
So that's back to what I was saying about there's no reason why we can't all work together.
For sure.
You know, and finding an answer, getting to a solution faster, permanently.
Yeah. Takes a village. It's the whole herb in that regard. And I think a lot of people find themselves on this path, you know, like, you know, we are each our own missing piece, missing puzzle to, you know, living a happy, healthy, whole, fulfilling life. We've been kind of outsourcing our knowledge to experts, and there's a time and a place for that, right? Somebody who's devoted their life to a very particular expertise, but it's got to come back to that foundation. I think that's what herbalism represents. You know, I think it's Terry Willard that talks about, you know, the earth is growing more herbalists. People are feeling the call, not necessarily to quote unquote be a herbalist, you know, maybe that might happen reluctantly, right? Or willingly, they could play that role in the community for others, but first and foremost, it's for themselves. We are our own doctors, we are our own nutritionists, we are our own herbalists first and foremost, and then we can look to others to fill in those holes and provide that insight on top of what we're beginning to develop for ourselves.
Yeah. A lot of people, especially if they've been trained, let's take a basic medical doctor, it's really hard for them to understand vibrational healing.
Right.
It's just beyond their scope, unless they've had something work on themselves or whatever. But I always like to say the best drugs in the world do not come from a pharmacist or a health food store or a high school parking lot, right? They come from your endocrine glands and your brain.
Oh, totally.
So we are manufacturers,
Yeah.
but sometimes, like, everybody is pretty much born with all the tools that are required to have a good, long, happy life.
Yeah.
But outside factors, largely stress in today's world, get you offline, and then you need help from somewhere. And things like flower essences and homeopathy help nudge you back onto healing yourself,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's how vibrational healing works.
Totally.
Where a full-on, full-strength dose of something is too scary, it doesn't work, or it throws you more out of balance.
Yeah.
So they help guide us back into, like with working with essential oils. I don't even like the word aromatherapy. I think it sounds way too flaky,
Right.
especially coming from Alberta.
Right.
Like I've been at national conferences where I have in my pocket somewhere a little vial, and I reintroduce myself. Somebody just brought me out to the podium, so we've got Blaine Andrusek here and blah, blah, blah. And I said, hi, yes, I'm Blaine Andrusek. I'm here from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and I work in the oil business, which doesn't surprise people because they know a little bit about Calgary.
Yeah.
And I'll reach in my pocket and say, but most people in Calgary that are in the oil business work with those big 45-gallon drums.
Yeah.
And I work with these little vials here.
Right.
But some of what we do with essential oils is where the oils actually do the job. So if you have a fungal infection in your foot, I might use tea tree and lemongrass together. That's not aromatherapy. That's allopathic. The word allo means against in Latin.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you use one thing against the other,
Yeah.
right? So to me, that's not aromatherapy. You could cut your nose right off and wrap a bandage around your head. The oils still work,
Right.
because they're antifungal,
Yeah.
right? Chemically, that's what they do. So they work for the job. It wasn't about the aroma. But there's other things we do where, back to where I was a few minutes ago, the oils stimulate you to do the job.
Right.
So one working to help itself. Oneness is where we get into homeo, and that's what homeopathy is all about.
Right.
Where, like, a lot of homeopathic treatments are things like spider venom and heavy metals,
Yeah.
you know, and arsenic
Yeah.
and things like that. And you don't, well, this is poison. Yes, but it's just a little bit of poison
Yeah.
to trick you back into fixing yourself.
Right.
That's the easiest explanation I can offer. And so, yeah, there'll be times where, yeah, I don't think you want me. I think you want to go see somebody that does homeopathy
Right.
or whatever. You know?
Yeah, and it's amazing. We live in the time, talked about that no one knows it all because, A, there's way too much to know and there's so much that we don't even know. But we live in a time where we've got access to all this wisdom, all this knowledge that has been, accumulated throughout the ages, not only in one culture, but all cultures we have access to. And it's that old phrase, standing on the shoulders of giants, right? To have the understanding that we have, and then access to the herbs as well, or the oils, or whatever, the homeopathic remedies, all this stuff that has taken individuals lifetimes upon lifetimes to develop. We've got access to it, and it's an amazing time to be alive.
I've said for many years that all over the world where there are physical threats or an imbalance in what's available to eat,
Yeah.
herbs will grow within 10 feet to make it work. So there's
Yeah.
there's a funnel web spider, it's called, in Australia,
Yeah.
that's lethal. And it builds these big funnel-shaped webs so that it can catch large bugs, even a small bird. In some cases, I've seen some of these webs, they're almost strong enough to pull a trailer with. And at the back of the web, there's a female sitting there, big mama. She just wants to lay there and eat and lay eggs.
Yeah.
And she's got this teeny little husband, and he runs around taking care of the web. And he's got fangs that'll go right through boot leather. And until recently, the only known antidote, excuse me, the only known antidote was the oil that was in the bark of the melaleuca trees.
Right.
And the Aussies all know that. Slowly, sorry, something just got me with the tea there. And so they'll have, just as we might have something really common, even chewing gum beside the till, the checkout counter at a store. You heading up this road, mate? You got your tea oil with you? You don't want to go up this road without your tea oil. So they'll all, if you're a tourist, they're going to make sure you've got the oil.
Right.
But if you're out on your own in the bush and this big spider bites you, and you're going to run screaming in no particular direction, you're going to die.
Right.
But if you stay right where you are, and this is where things become spiritual, and ask for guidance.
Right.
Wait a minute. You want me to scrape the bark off this tree? The one with the spiders in it. And rub that on the back. This tree. You're a crazy God. But by golly, it works.
Yeah.
You know, so all over the world there's things like that, and every traditional recipe, I don't care if it's cabbage rolls or something from Lithuania or Japanese food or Greek food or whatever, where there might be something wrong with that dish. If you ate it every day, something's going to happen in your body, like kidney stones or whatever. Yeah. There's herbs that grow there that are always used in that dish.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you follow traditional recipes, that's how it works. It's not about the flavor. We got used to the flavor.
Right.
We got used to the flavor of oregano with spaghetti and meatballs.
Yeah.
But it's there because carbohydrate and proteins together are a bad combination. So the oregano is there because it's an antibiotic.
Right.
And you won't burp and fart until you poop your pants or something. So I'm getting, okay, slow down, Blaine. But you get the point.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
It's everywhere in the world, things grow for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to figure it out.
Yeah.
Back to we're complicated, the planet's complicated.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody's watching us like we're just in somebody's aquarium on the kitchen table and we're all somebody's experiment. Hey, they finally figured that one out. But
there's, like, that is herbalism. It's rooted in, simple, traditional folk wisdom, in that sense. And there's so much power to that. And as wonderful as science is, and it's definitely evolving us and moving us forward, sometimes we can get a little ahead of ourselves. We can get too kind of heady, too intellectual, figuring it out, that we lose those basics, those foundationals that people, like you say, the oregano and the tomato sauce or whatever it is. These kind of simple, obvious basics.
Well, as we've gotten to the point where a lot of standard I got stuck on Alexander Fleming. Antibiotics, and we've overused them. Penicillin was discovered not long before I was born. So when I was a little boy in the early 50s, whether it was a cut that wasn't looking good or a sore throat that wasn't healing quickly enough or a very major injury, is little Blaine allergic to a penicillin yet? Oh, we'll give him some more. And they find they don't work so well anymore.
Yeah.
So every large pharmaceutical company has scouts in jungles in Taiwan and places like that, in Thailand, everywhere in the world, looking for new opportunities to find herbs that are antibiotics.
Right.
And maybe they could synthesize them if they're really lucky, or let's just use the darn herbs.
Yeah.
But everybody, because we're looking for help from other parts of the world, right? We overdid it.
Yeah.
But that's possible as soon as we take, I've heard recently that there's several strains of Staphylococcus now that are resistant to tea tree because it was overused.
Right, interesting.
You know, it's kind of like the old story about the boy who cried wolf.
Yeah.
I've met people from Australia and France and other places where they use a lot of oils that think that the way people in North America are using oregano for everything,
Right.
like it's just on the kind of, you got anything, you actually take it every morning all winter.
Yeah.
That's just darn right silly, because you're going to end up with a strain of something that you've trained to be resistant,
Right.
because you overused the oregano.
Yeah. Actually, we was on a call with Yarrow Willard last night. We were talking about herbs and mushrooms for resilience and immunity, and he gave the example of the oregano, where he knows people who have, developed ulcers, for instance. Like they've damaged, that soft lining of their digestive
it's
system.
going that way.
Just like, burnt it right up, essentially, just like too strong, too much from the oregano oil.
Yeah. So that's why I call some of the herbs, when I'm teaching, big guns.
Yeah.
So we're going pheasant hunting this afternoon.
Right.
With a professional guide, and I've got a rocket-propelled grenade with him. He's carrying it because it's too heavy. My back's a little sore. There's one on the hillside now, sir. Should I load the weapon? Yes, thank you. And sorry. There's a 9-foot hole in the hillside, and a few feathers coming down, and there's nothing left for supper. Yeah. I think we got him, boss.
Right.
That was way overuse.
Yeah.
So, don't you have oregano? Yes, I have 9 kinds in my collection, personally. When did you use some last? 6 years ago?
Right.
Like, I want to leave the big guns in the drawer until I think you really need them. Mm-hmm. And there's more gentle ways of fighting a cut finger or something.
Right.
Than getting the cannon out every time.
Yeah.
Good point. Thank you, Will, Yarrow.
And, which comes back to what you were talking about earlier, a lot of those herbs that are more tonic, the adaptogens, they have that dual directional activity that they're kind of building, your resilience over time, right? Like you say, like going to the gym, like doing those crunches, building that strength, building that resilience. There's some herbs you can take daily, building that up versus,
right?
Yeah, they're more gentle, more tonic.
That's where the word tonic comes from, is they tone you
right
into like cleaner blood or stronger vital organs or whatever. What am I drinking, by the way?
Oh, okay. You are drinking, this is my chaga chai formula with elderberry added. So, yeah, it just felt seasonally appropriate. Hence, also this conversation with Yarrow last night was, here we are, it's autumn, we're back into routine, people are at school, people are back to work. And I know several people that have, come down with something. They've had to take a couple days off, and it hasn't been too serious, but it's starting to go around, as it does every year. So this is kind of my way of, I think the chagas can be one of those big guns, but it can also be one of those ones that is a nice, like, tonifying, get yourself ready.
Sometimes it's just about dosage, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and then it's got star anise in it, and then of course the elderberries. A few folks are kind of within my proximity. I was like, okay, might be time for the elderberry.
And you chose that for me because I had told you that I had just pretty much beaten a cold.
There you are. Yeah.
But it's not 100% gone yet.
No. What were some of the tonic herbs that you like to work with? I know, Yarrow, you mentioned it last night, like Terry, he's probably taken reishi every day for the last, 40 years. Were there any particular herbs that for you were just like such great allies? Of course, through these conversations you've highlighted a lot that you've used in very particular times, but did you have kind of a go-to herb that was like, no, nothing in particular, this is just kind of more my daily tonic? Maybe not that you took every day for 40 years, but you would have kind of longer bouts. It was kind of like a solid, like just a good friend and companion and trainer, I guess, if we want to use that tonifying analogy.
Well, I'm just thinking about, supposedly there's enough history that this is a true story, but this guy who was Li Chongyun was his name, this Chinese guy that lived for something ridiculous. I forget how many years, but it's
Right.
hard to believe.
Yeah,
And he had
321.
this daily tonic, and one of the things that would have been in there would have been Siberian ginseng,
Right, yeah.
not the other ginsengs. They're a little different.
Yeah.
When we look at different ginsengs, some of them are considered too male for women to take them regularly,
Right.
or they're hot herbs.
Yeah.
So if you take them too strong for too long, they're going to create heat issues with your body. This is Chinese thinking now.
Yeah.
Where you've gotten too yang,
Right.
right? And you're suffering new problems because of that. But I mean, one that we can never overuse, really, because it's nutritional, but just a really common herb that's going to help cleanse your blood, is parsley.
Okay.
Find a way to use parsley virtually every day. You can just make tea with it, or put it in
Yeah.
a sandwich, or put it in a salad, or put it in a spaghetti and meatball sauce, or whatever.
For sure. That's
Because,
funny. Laura's like obsessed with parsley and has been for months. Like, we've got it growing in the garden. We were traveling. We're like, oh, farm stand, let's pull over. Maybe they got some parsley. Like, she's on a parsley kick right now and has been for several months.
Good.
Yeah. And we often kind of like don't give enough credit to the culinary herbs, do we? And especially the spices. But yeah, keep going about parsley. How amazing that one is.
Well, it works on not whipping, but nudging, supporting
Yeah.
your kidneys to filter your blood better. So all sorts of things that could end up out of balance, back to just eating too much red meat, and we need something to make your kidneys work better, to get the urea out of your bloodstream.
Yeah.
I suppose you mentioned garlic is something that there's something like 110 sulfur compounds in garlic that, and I really don't think vampires are going to invade my bedroom
Yeah.
at the home there. But
Well, but there's the whole interpretation of what is a vampire, right?
yeah. Do you know about ergot? You know about the wild
Yeah.
ergot? Do you know that story?
Yeah, for sure.
It's another thing that I'm sad that so many of my collections of things that I had in my home were just packed up by other people or thrown away, because I'd found some a few times just hiking in the foothills.
Oh, cool.
On wild rye, and I could show it in classes.
Yeah, that's cool.
But I realize I'm segueing here. Yeah, vampires and werewolves. So, ergot of rye, and this has to do with all of the so-called witches in Salem that were burned at the stake and that sort of thing. Well, there's that old gal that lives on the edge of the swamp there. And remember a few years ago when we put too much flour in the wagon and the axle broke and it fell on Johnny's leg and it was getting really fat. The doctor said we should cut it off. But that little Mabel there out in the woods, she came in and made some herbal stuff for him, and look, he's out there playing Frisbee right now. So a lot of mostly women were accused of witchcraft. They were just herbalists. And when something went wrong, the whole town got sick. Or you'd have villages where it might have taken an outsider to realize that somebody was darn right hallucinating that their kitchen was full of flies.
Right.
So there was this fungus, it's called an ergot group, that grow specifically on wild rye. And in early towns and villages in New England and such, a lot of people were doing things communally. So I might have the only field in the neighborhood that got infected with this ergot, but we mix a lot of our grains together to make the whole village's flour supply for the winter and that sort of thing. So you might have a whole village
Yeah.
that's ill, obviously, you know.
Yeah.
It's
got like LSD like compounds in it, doesn't it?
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so an outsider would come and say, well, you've got a curse on the village.
Right.
Well, it must be Mabel, the witch.
Yeah.
So we better burn her, you know,
Yeah.
or hang her or something. And just channel surfing one night, I found that, oh my gosh, and I watched this program where somebody had somehow gone through, I don't know if it was looking at growth rings on trees or what they'd done, but they had backtracked a couple hundred years of history in Central Europe to weather patterns, and when there would have been seasons where it was lots of rain and lots of moisture, which favors a lot of fungi,
Yeah.
right? And went through legal history and co-docked that to show that all of the trials that actually made it to court to try our neighbor Bill for being a werewolf
Right.
happened during peak ergot years.
Yeah.
And maybe Bill's just been out hunting for a few days, and he bagged one, and he's coming home now. And the only reason we can see him at all, we're out having some tea on the front porch, and the only reason we can even see him and say, hey, hi, Bill, is that the moon's full, and he's got blood all over him
Right.
because he was hunting and bagged an elk or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it got to be known that when the moon's full, the werewolves come out, and Bill ends up getting tried for being a werewolf.
Right.
And it was really because the whole town was higher than a kite on this on this wild fungus, you see.
Yeah.
And so there's things like that. But back to your question, I don't right now. I'm not taking any of my usual stuff. I'm at the care home, and
What have you been doing Lion's Mane?
and now I'm on Lion's Mane. Thank you.
Yeah.
But I mean, I used to take a lot more supplements than I do now. But I think they're on. I think I'm on a few basics like B vitamins, and I think that little cocktail of pills I get every day. I think at least half of that is nutritional.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know that I can be low in potassium, for example. But I eat a lot of garlic and a lot of parsley at home. Siberian ginseng is a lot different than regular ginseng. It's one that you could take long term.
Yeah. Eleutherocentecoccus, right? The Latin name.
Look at you go.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. It's funny, hey, like Siberian ginseng, or I just heard Tongkat Ali described as Indonesian ginseng. There's Suma, which is described as Brazilian ginseng. Maca can be Peruvian ginseng. And as you mentioned, you know, Eleuthero, which is not a true ginseng, that term often gets applied to a lot of herbs.
So wild sarsaparilla that grows in the Boreal forest
Right.
is technically a ginseng, I think. At least it looks like one. It must be, because it looks exactly like ginseng.
Yeah.
When my brother was expanding the cottage into a home, and he just had somebody in there with a bobcat to trash a whole area and dig it up, and I just about cried because I was like, buddy, if you would have let me in here for a week before you got the equipment,
Yeah.
I could have wildcrafted enough stuff to tincture here
Yeah.
to more than pay for the equipment.
Oh, totally.
You know,
Yeah.
it was just a forest full of
Yeah.
all sorts of things like that. But
Yeah.
and we just, I think, I know Terry has, and I got one of these jobs once with some board or division of government in Saskatchewan, where we looked at the potential commercial harvest in an area where they're going to clear cut anyway,
Right.
and that the little people in that area were worth more than the lumber.
Right. Yeah.
You know, we documented that a few times. In
Gosh.
some cases, orchids like lady slipper and
Yeah.
stuff that's really valuable. you know.
Yeah.
So we're just blind to it, you know. But
Yeah.
you know, every time you get, I know when I'm teaching botany, I put one slide up on the screen that's just this beautiful, it looks like something from another planet. And it's just 4 feet of boreal forest, but all of these tiny little lichens and things that are on the ground. And that's something that the average person would just jump out of their boat with their boots on and crush to oblivion to tie the boat up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We go in and do a lot of stomping, so we can clear cut an area and go in and replant trees.
Right.
But it may be centuries before some of those little people come back.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
You know?
And oftentimes the trees are only there because of those little people, you know, like they are kind of...
And back to mycorrhiza.
Yeah.
Nutrition, it's all one.
Yeah.
If the fire was hot enough, the mycorrhiza will be destroyed and the fungus won't come back for a long time.
Yeah. I know. It's frustrating, you know? I mean, there's so much kind of wrong in the world that it's really easy to point out, but there's so many like just simple things that we could just turn all this around, you know, if we just did a million small little shifts, small simple things. And yeah, coming back to the tea tree, right? Like that is as an example, like what we need is all around us. We just need to become aware of it. And you know, being a wild crafter, being a herbalist, like I certainly get asked or questioned a lot of times, just like, oh, you know, like you're taking from the environment, and or, you know, did you ask? And like, of course, like it's all respectful, but you know, the impact that I can have as an individual, even, you know, wild harvesting, you know, for a community and making products with it, like infinitesimal compared to just one clear cut, you know, like.
Living in the home, I so miss just being in the woods. And
Yeah.
there's, I finally gotten back to walking almost every day. I figure my walking around the building, there's about 4 blocks. It's a big building.
Yeah.
And at the back end, there's an old picnic table with some of those cheap lawn chairs where some of the staff go to have a smoke. And for a different reason, it was at a beach back in northern Saskatchewan where there was a picnic table at a beach where I used to go swim regularly, where there was about, I don't know, 400 cigarette butts on the ground.
Right.
So when I got back to the cabin, I had to Google, how long does it take a filter tip cigarette to compost?
Right.
And the answers came back from 400 to 4,000 years.
Right.
To break down. And so anyway, this table is right in the middle of my walk, and sometimes my back's starting to fire, so I sit there for just a few minutes to give my back a rest. And if there's anybody outside smoking, I make sure I'm upwind of them, or it's going to kill my walk. And when I was there was that yesterday? The day before? Doesn't matter. It was a couple days, because it's growing still. I just was blankly looking at the ground. And, oh, there's a shaggy Maine mushroom.
Oh, no way. Yeah.
And I was really happy that Caprinus comatus came back to mind, because I'm supposed to not have any memory because of my stroke. And I thought about it for a minute, and it just took a moment for me to come up with autodeliquescence.
Yeah.
Like there's no other meaning for that word. Mm-hmm. Autodeliquescence. To deliquesce means to dissolve yourself with enzymes.
Right.
I looked it up. When I first went to the dictionary, I got nowhere, and then I went to Google and got into a couple of sites, and I was right on it with the inky caps, we call them.
Yeah.
Because if you pick shaggy manes, they're actually delicious, mm-hmm. but you have to handle them like 400-year-old Ukrainian Easter eggs,
right?
Shells, and rinse them a bit. If they quite often grow right on the edges of roads,
Yeah.
you have to rinse them very carefully, and then literally slice them right into the pan.
Yeah.
Because if they get crushed, you can't put them in a plastic bag and put them in your backpack. When you get off from your hike, you have a bag full of black ink.
Yeah.
Because they completely dissolve themselves, you have a bag full of black ink full of spores.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you went out and spread it around in the forest, maybe you're doing a good thing, but they autodeliquesce. So there was only one, and it's been so long since I've been in my Boreal to just sit there and see a mushroom like that I had to just sit beside it and kind of meditate for a while.
Yeah, cool.
And when I came back the next day, it was an inch taller.
Right.
So, yeah, and then a few minutes later, a couple of nuthatches. I love, do you know nuthatches?
Yeah.
I love nuthatches because when they land on a bush in front of you, it looks like you had a can full of them and shook it up and dumped it into the bush, because they'll land, it's almost like mullein flowers popping. They land upside down and sideways. They'll go up branches backwards, and
right.
you know what I mean? They don't just do what normal birds do. So I've always loved them. And I talked to my ex about, I just said, hey, I have to call you because I always think about you when I see birds, because she's a real birder. And she texted me back saying that there's a lot of them. She goes to the bird sanctuary regularly there, and she said, and we might see there's a heron that stays often as late as November that might be there for us to see, a great blue heron. And so I had to text her back and say, so you're willing to be sharing your heron? And we had a little gambit going.
Yeah.
But I have a digital camera in my room that I haven't looked at for a couple of years. So I'm going to have to see if what do we need? Is it battery charger, or what do we need? And figure it out, because I have a 500mm mirror lens, and I'll take that on the walk when I go there.
Right.
Just to get some bird shots, you know.
Yeah.
But it meant so much to me just to see some nuthatches and a mushroom in the middle of the city.
Right.
Sitting in a grove of ancient poplars. They were black poplars that when they get to the point where the stumps are at least 4 feet wide, you know, and branches, you could see some had been cut off because they break in the wind, and
right.
That's why it's actually illegal to plant a poplar in the city anymore.
Oh, really? Hey?
Yeah. We used to put them in new homes in places like golf courses and such, because they move easily and they grow big fast. So they were very popular, poplars, but they just do so much damage in windstorms.
Right.
You know, where they thousands of dollars of damage to cars and.
Wow, I didn't realize that. Hey, you can't plant them anymore.
No, even though the people who got that going admit they're an important part of our ecosystem.
Absolutely.
But, you know, we'll plant them along the Bow River,
right
on the edge of town, but not in town.
Right, okay.
Right, so there's columnar poplars that just make a mess, and there's aspen, which are okay, but balsamifera you can't plant anymore.
Really? Wow, didn't know that.
Like they're almost, I don't know if it's the same list, but like on the noxious weed list.
Right, okay.
And there's another whole story. When we first started doing herb walks, I got this tip from Terry, because I never would have known, but the city has a noxious weed guide, and at the time it was mostly line drawings, not photographs, but it's a noxious weed guide. And we both, over the years, had been hired to do herb walks by staff of the city of Calgary.
Yeah.
And as a guide for the herb walk, we used the city's noxious weed lists. So we've got city employees writing notes in their own publication as to how many things you can do with these noxious weeds.
Right.
You know, how medicinal they are.
Cool. Yeah, that's the way to do it. And they won't get in trouble for picking those.
Well, it's funny how that goes. Like we talked about the thistles there a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy.
Fun.
Anyway, I drifted, I guess.
No, it's all good. Well, maybe we'll leave it there. It was a good chat today. And thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll take all your comments, all your questions.
Yeah, email us. We'll be back.
Listen down. Right on. Okay.
I don't get to everybody every day, but Blaine the Herbman at Gmail.
There it is. All right.
That's simple.
Cool.
And I'll either give you a response or we'll bring it up on a future show.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Till next time.